everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I'm Abram Kielsmeyer-Jones, and this is Translation Notes. Last week, we went all the way to the end of Mark. Well, depends on what you think the ending of Mark is, but we went through verse 8 and talked briefly about some of the different options that there are for endings for Mark and pointed folks in a direction where you could do more research about that if you wanted to. Today, we are going back to Mark 3 because when we first started this series some years ago now, we did not do Mark 3. I, in fact, did not know we were going to go all the way through the book. I thought it would just be selections, but there continued to be interest both from you and from me. And so here we are, for which I'm very grateful. But we did leave most of Mark 3 uncovered. So we're going back this week and next, and I just add the note here in the handout that we only did the last 5 verses of Mark 3, but now we're going to do the rest of Mark 3, and we're going to try to do it in 2 weeks, and we'll see how we do with that. So we're covering more ground. That means less detail per verse, but we've been all the way through Mark now, so we ought to be able to handle more text more capably, I think. This is Mark 3, 1 through 12. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. I will be in accordance the whole time, but this is not a feature-based webinar per se. It's not so much about here's a deep dive on this particular feature. We have many of those webinars that you can find recorded and posted. If you go to your help menu in the Accordance app, that's probably the easiest place to find it. Just go right there to Accordance help. Go here to webinars, and you'll find a whole host of recorded material that you can access. For our translation notes series, our goal is to translate from Greek into English and both raise and answer some of the questions that arise as we do that. We look especially at lexical questions. So what does this word mean? What does it mean in this context? We also look at grammatical questions. Why is it an aorist or an imperfect? How is it functioning? What kind of participle is this? Why are the words in this order? Those are the questions that we look at. So I'm excited to do this with you today. I've split this into a few different parts, Mark 3, 1 through 4, and then 5 through 6. Most translations will put those all together as one passage, but I wanted to break it up a little bit more. And then we'll do 7 through 12 all as one. This handout, by the way, is available to you in the GoToWebinar control panel. You'll just want to find the icon that says materials. It's got a little paper clip and a piece of paper there. If you're not showing that, go to the 3 sideways dots, the horizontal dots to show more. And then when you click on more, you'll see that icon for the materials, and the handout is there. We'll also email it to you if you're here registered after the session, along with the recording, since we're recording today. And anyone can access this handout now, also at tinyurl.com/marktranslationnotes. All right, let's begin with Mark 3, 1 through 4. And I'm going to go to Accordance for this. And again, you can see here, this is the NA28. They've got this grouped as a paragraph. And I changed my text pane display. This is one feature I'll share. Typically, when I translate, more often than not, I've got separate verses with space. So again, that's in the gear icon right here. Set text pane display, and usually I've got separate verses with space. Now when I click on OK, it looks like this. Now there are a couple reasons I do that. One, visually, I just find this easier to deal with. When I see a whole block of Greek text, no matter how confident I may be in my translation abilities, it feels like a lot. So psychologically, it breaks it up for me. And then for another, I can see patterns a little bit more easily, like look at Kai, 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 Kai. We've got a long streak here. In fact, almost all of our verses today begin with Kai, except for verse 10. So it's just an easier way to break it up and also to visualize it, to make some connections. But what you lose when you display it that way is the flow of thought, potentially. Mark didn't necessarily write this a verse at a time. I mean, he had to write it a letter at a time, or his scribe did, but he wasn't thinking in chapter and verse. Those came much later. He was thinking as you and I might think if we wrote a narrative. He was thinking in story terms. So we realize that these verses are a little bit artificial. Anyway, when you've got it separate with verses, you'll still see the pilcrow here that will mark when a new paragraph starts. So you can still see there's a new one at 7. But I do want to also just take this opportunity to remind us of this text pane display, and I'm going to keep it as paragraphs with the space so we can see everything together. So we'll start with verses 1 through 4, and I'll read those out loud, and then we'll translate, and I've got some notes along the way. Kai ezelthen palin estain synagogein, kai ein eke anthropos, eseramenen ekon ten kera, kai pareterun autan, e toisabasin therapuse autan, hinakate goresosin autu. Verse 3, kai lege to anthropo, to ten zeran, kera ekonti, egere es ta mesan. Kai lege autois, ezestin toisabasin, agathon poiesai, e kako poiesai, suxein sosai, e apoktenai, hoi de esiopon. Let's just go left to right for now, just with verses 1 through 4. And he went into, or he entered again into the synagogue. And there was, so that's an imperfect indicative third person singular from a me to be, ein. You'll notice, we'll hold off on that. And there was there, okay, a man, anthropos. That can mean just person, but in this case it's a male person, so it's a man. Eseramenein, there's a perfect middle participle, ekon, and that goes with having. So having a withered ten kera, hand. And pareterun, and they were watching him, if on the Sabbath he will heal him, in order that kategoresosin, in order that they might accuse him. We'll come back to all this more slowly in just a moment. And he says to the man, the one with the hand, the one having the withered hand, get up into the middle. And he says to them, ezestin, is it lawful? Is it okay? Is it permissible? Is it allowed on the Sabbath good to do or evil to do? Notice here you've got agathon, poiesai as two different words. But then instead of poiesai, kakas, we get this kakapoiesai, this singular word here that occurs some other times. But it means to do what is good or to do what is evil. A soul or a life to save, or to destroy or to kill. And they were silent, esiopon. All right, let me share some notes that I have on this, and I put the whole translation here in the handout. I'll just read through the translation, maybe a little bit smoother of a translation than we just had. And he went again into the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand. And the Pharisees were observing him to see if he would heal him, the man, on the Sabbath, in order that they might accuse him, Jesus. But Jesus said to the man with the withered hand, stand up in the midst of these people. Then he, Jesus, said to them all, is it allowed to do good on the Sabbath or to do evil, to save a life or to kill it? Or you might even say to save a life or to destroy it. But they were silent. Let's go verse by verse with some of the notes that I've got here. It starts pretty simply. He went again into the synagogue. I couldn't help but notice this ezelthen palin es tein synagogein. So if you were to be like really literal about your translation, it would be something like he went into the synagogue. But eserkomai can also just mean enter, which is go into. And we would say enter into without it sounding redundant. It turns out, in fact, I was curious about this, that this ace, ace, so notice here, a, sail thin, ace, you've got it twice. Looking through examples of this acerchomai, it's actually pretty typical that it would still have ace here. In other words, it's not a sail thin, tain synagogein. It's not he went into the synagogue. You've got ace as a prefix to the verb, and then you've got ace again here as the preposition. How do we know if that's typical? Well, there are a couple ways we can find out. One way is we could construct a search where we looked for acerchomai within a couple words of ace. That's easy enough to do in accordance. We could also triple click on acerchomai. BDAG will often have some information right up here at the section that I tend to skip because I want to get right to the definition, but it will often have definition about what we call principal parts. So what does the future usually look like? It might also have information about things like this preposition and if it's used with it. It does not in this case, so you don't find it there. But what you do find is lots of examples. And so you could just go here, say Luke 4:16, or actually let's even just stay in Mark 1:21. They went to Capernaum, he entered the synagogue, same exact thing. How does Mark construct it there? We'll open a parallel pane, and we've got aseilthon, ace tain synagogein. So same thing, ace, ace. These other examples, now that we've got this window open, we can just click on these examples and we'll see the same thing, aseilthon, ace, with other instances. So at first that struck me as redundant. In fact, that's just common usage. I didn't go all the way through these. I don't know whether there's an aseilthon or an acerchomai without an ace, but you could find it by searching through these examples or even doing your own specific search if you wanted to find that. That's one thing to note at the beginning. As far as the nature of this man's hand, that's eseramene. Now that comes from Zerino, and I'll go to BDAG for that. So I'm going to triple click and it will open it in my default lexicon. And we've got 3 different definitions listed. And you can see here that this word is versatile. It could mean to stop a flow such as sap or other liquid. And so to cause dryness, to dry up, to wither up, and trees can wither up. And of course, that's applicable here. I mean, if you think about blood flow, but that just shows us that this can be about other things beside hands. This definition is where BDAG locates the verse to become dry to the point of being immobilized, to be paralyzed, and they even graciously give us this exact verse as an example, which doesn't always happen, but it's great when it does. And here they quote what we're just looking at, a man with a withered hand, i.e. one incapable of motion. So I don't know that Mark is necessarily trying to describe what exactly the hand looks like, so much as the fact that it doesn't do what the man wants it to do. It's not working according to ideal design. And so I think withered might be the way to do it, but you could also say immobilized or paralyzed or something like that. That's the setup then to this next verse where it says the Pharisees, actually just says they, were observing him to see if he would heal the man. We do have to go back. It's been quite a while since we've been in Mark 2, but we can simply, might even open up a parallel pane and scroll up. We just have they here in verse 2, which is a little maybe confusing at first to us because we were just in Mark 16. But if we go up, we don't get very far before we see the Pharisees in verse 24. So he's still talking with them. In fact, they're talking about the Sabbath. So he entered the synagogue again. And so there is potentially a change of scenery, but there's no indication that this they has changed. So I've just put that in brackets there. Verse 2 has a lot of pronouns. And if you just translate it with pronouns as pronouns, you'll get, and they were observing him to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath in order that they might accuse him. Now, I don't know about you. I'm able to keep that all straight if I'm following the story, but when I think about somebody reading this, or if I think about myself reading my own translation later, that's a lot of hymns to keep straight. So you would just want to decide, do you want to bring out who each one is, or some combination? I might say, and the Pharisees were observing him to see if he would heal the man on the Sabbath in order that they might accuse him. Or they were observing him to see if he would heal him in order that they might accuse Jesus, or something like that. Probably what I would do is just default to clarity here and not think so much, well, it's Auton, it has to be him. I would think more, I want to be clear here. Greek is more flexible with either leaving out its pronouns or having some ambiguity as to who they refer to. I don't think there's any question out of Auton, Autu, which pronoun refers to which person. So if that's the case, I think we may as well bring it out in translation, but of course you don't have to. That's just one of the issues there to consider. So the Pharisees, what are they doing? They're paraterun, from paratereo. I'm going to look at that word with you briefly. Let's go back to Mark 3:2. I'm going to triple click this, and we've got, it's observe someone to see what the person does. BDAG doesn't give us the root here, but you may recognize this tereo. You'll see that quite a bit in the Septuagint. For guarding or keeping or observing in the sense of following, like observing the commandments. Hovering over this in accordance will show you in the instant details the root paratereo. So one question I would have is, does this para intensify the tereo? I think we've seen verbs where para attached to a verb can serve an intensifying effect. It could just be that tereo is something you do with commandments. Paratereo is more something to do with the person. BDAG doesn't answer this question. So we may want to, if that's a question you have, maybe go to something else. Maybe we try Louw-Nida and see what they have for paratereo. Just watch closely. Or to guard, we get nothing on the morphology. I wonder if Brill has anything. There's a little bit more here. It just shows you the roots, but we're not getting a whole lot of etymology here, and maybe that's fine. At any rate, what it means is they are watching him like a hawk. They are watching him closely, and they're doing it for a specific purpose. It's to see if he would heal this guy on the Sabbath, and they're doing that for a specific purpose, which is that they want to accuse him. Kategoresosin. From we've got kata and goreo. So to bring charges is one way to understand that, as in legal charges. So if you wanted to bring that out in translation, you could. I think accuse is sufficient. Let me just stop there on verse 2. We'll keep going with verse 3 and 4, but I want to see if you've got comments or questions on those first two verses. Anything there with the setup. You can type those into the chat or the questions box rather. That's just a one-way typed chat, and I'll see your question and either respond privately or share with the group anonymously. Let me share this comment. Somebody says, Eseramenen ekon tenkera must be a visual disorder since the healing is clearly seen. Right, and by visual disorder, I trust you don't mean a disorder with his vision, but something that you could see, a visible disorder, right? It's, yeah, for sure. So this is kind of an obvious setup in the sense that, I mean, they're really, this binary that Jesus sets up of to do good or do evil, to save a life or to kill. I think to your point, since this is visible, there's not really the option of just pretending that you didn't notice it here. I mean, this has really forced the issue in a sense. So yeah, that's a great point. Keep comments and questions coming. I'm going to just move into verse 3, where we get kailegeto anthropo. We're still using this present tense here. Mark is, and he says to the guy, and he said to the man, the one with the withered hand, Agere, get up, eis ta meson, in the midst or in the middle. Now, that alone is probably not a very clear English translation. I've just noted here, this is elision, or the verb is to elide, to leave out, which again, I maybe sound like a broken record, but it just happens so much that Greek can do that. It can leave out objects, especially, whether direct or indirect. So what Jesus is asking him to stand up in the midst of is these people, although it could also be just in the room. So this is not, I've put this in brackets because it's not in the text. The word people is not in the text. Stand up in the midst, I would probably not leave that translation. It's really stand up in the middle of everyone, or stand up in the middle of everything, or stand up right here in the middle. But I think you need more than just in the midst. So you're not missing something in the Greek. I got to the end of the sentence and I thought, is the sentence really over? In fact, this clause is over. We just need to bring that out in English. Kai lege to anthropo, and now kai lege autois. So first he says to the man, and now in verse 4 he speaks to them. So we've seen this in Mark before with other healings, in fact. Healings take place in the midst of the disciples, a crowd. There are usually onlookers there. And often Jesus will talk to the one to be healed and the people watching. It's really amazing how adeptly he can go back and forth with these different audiences that he's speaking to. So now with the same word lege, we get autois. Then he said to them. Some, a lot of translations, a lot of print Bibles don't have italics or bold. I think maybe initially that was a typesetting issue, but maybe this is in italics here. Then he said to them, or then he said to them all. There's a real movement here that Jesus is speaking to everyone. Now, who is them? Who is the them? Well, we've got the Pharisees here, but they're also in a synagogue, so presumably there's more than just the Pharisees, but he's at least saying to the Pharisees, because he's been dialoguing with them, he's saying at least to them, ezestin, is it lawful, is it allowed, is it okay, is it permitted on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill it? And again, to the point of that question, with this disorder being, with the withered hand being so visible, there really is a choice that it's either going to be, I mean, it's essentially acknowledged in the sense that everyone can see it, presumably, and so unless the guy's hiding it or something like that. And so the choice is up or down, yay or nay, do good or do evil. And the way that Jesus is phrasing this is interesting. It's no wonder they're silent, because they feel trapped by this question, which is ironic because they were coming to accuse him and to trap him. But this question that he's asking, and the Greek gives us, I mean, you can really see you've got the poieo here with good, poieo with bad. You've got these opposites of sosai and apoktenai. It really is a choice between two extremes. And Jesus is also saying doing nothing is not an option. It's not do I heal or not heal. It's do I save a life or kill it? Do I do good or do I do evil? So he is upping the ante. I think the Pharisees might have initially cast this in terms of, are you going to heal or not to heal? Notice that if he would heal on the Sabbath or not. But Jesus is saying, well, look, the terms are, or the stakes are much higher than just if I'm going to heal or not. The question is, am I going to give life or essentially just destroy it? Not that he himself would be destroying it, but Jesus is framing this in terms of, if you let this go just because it's the Sabbath, you're missing something bigger about what the Sabbath is about. And that is in chapter 2. We have that context here. So this is, if we were to go back, the Sabbath is made for people, not people for the Sabbath. So this is about life, not just following rules per se that actually end up going against the spirit in which the rules were given. So we'll stop there. I see some questions and comments in the questions box. That's verses 1 through 4. we'll move ahead after this, but yeah, just a really rich passage. And all through Mark, we've seen religious leaders try to trap Jesus in how they frame things, and then Jesus just gives it right back to them, and he reframes things in a way that Jesus and Mark want the readers and listeners to see these things as they're seeing them, and that just quiets them right down. Esiopon. They were silent. All right, let's see comments and questions that you've got. Is it possible for you to name? Yeah, I'm not sure I understand this question. Is it possible for you to move your name in the bottom left to the bottom right of the screen so it does not block out the instant details box? Okay, I don't mean to block out my instant details. Let me see if I can resize my screen. Let me know if that's any better for seeing instant details. Feel free to comment again if that didn't fix what you're. Oh, that's probably in the setup of the GoToWebinar. Okay, let me know if that's better. I just resized that. Yeah, here's a good comment. This is back to in the midst and what that means. Arise into the middle. Synagogues typically have an open central space. Yeah, so whether you want to translate that as in the middle of the synagogue or the middle of the people, I mean that really would be the same thing. But yeah, that's a great comment. Here's another comment. I'll put this in the chat so folks can say. Someone says context has the synagogue in Capernaum, Mark 1:22, 23, 29, 2:131. It is located in present-day Capernaum. And if we were to go back to the notes, and of course all the notes are here at tinyurl.com/Mark translation notes. Yeah, this really is kind of a part of a larger whole, which is the synagogue and healings and crowds. I mean, we're still very early on in Jesus's ministry, but yeah, good comment there, and thank you for that. Just see if there's anything else to respond to. Okay, great. All right, let's move on to verses 5 through 6. So really still part of the same passage, and we've got. I'll go to. Actually, did we do this in accordance yet? I don't think we did. Let's go back here and do it in accordance. I'm going to just resize this a little bit more. All right. Bear with me. Okay. Kai peri blepsamenos autus met orges. Sulupumenas epi te porose tes cardias auton legeto anthropo. Ektenan tenkera. Kai ezetenin kai apekatestate heker autu. Kai ezothontes hoi pharisaioi euthus metaton herodianon sumbulian edidun kat autu hapos autan apolesosin. And looking around at them with anger and grieving about the stubbornness or hardness of their hearts. Lege, again, still in the present, to anthropo. So we've got that. We had that in verse lege to anthropo in verse 3, lege autois in verse 4. Now lege to anthropo. He's back to focusing on the individual. Stretch out the hand. Stretch out your hand. And he stretched out his hand, and it was restored, and his hand was restored. And the Pharisees, going out immediately with the Herodians, gave counsel, held counsel, made plans against him, how they might destroy him. Let's smooth that out here. And looking around at them with anger, being grieved by the stubbornness of their hearts, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. So he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. So immediately the Pharisees went out and began scheming with the Herodians against him, how they could destroy him. I just note here, I put Jesus in brackets, and I think in my final translation, I probably would put Jesus there. It just says, we've got kata autu against him, but it's not impossible. I mean, I think about Lazarus being raised from the dead and how people were after really both Jesus and Lazarus at that point. So it's not impossible that for whatever reason the Pharisees could be angry with this man with the withered hand. So I do think that's worth clarifying, although maybe that's already clear enough to you. You're fine with the him, but we've got that same thing, autu and auton here, him and him, and I think I would want to clarify that that's Jesus. What is happening with this hand? Verse 5, let me go to accordance and look up that word. We've got right here, apokathistemi, and you can see in the instant details, we've got three roots, apo, kata, histemi. So from, against, or according to, and to set. Roughly speaking, I don't think this would be a good translation, but really what we're talking about here is putting it back to how it was before. That is in its ideal state. And you can see here in BDAG, we've got to change to an earlier good state or condition. So not just how it was before, but how it was in a good state. But we have single words for that in English, just like Greek does: restore, reestablish. You could even say heal, but I think this is a little bit more specific than heal, because it's not that the hand is disappearing or that he's getting a new hand. It's the same hand is being restored to how it would be if it hadn't been diseased. So this is a word that's worth looking at. You might even search for the lexeme, see is this used elsewhere in Mark. In fact, it's 3 times in Mark. We've got restoration of sight here, so that's interesting to see that it's used of a different healing, a different body part. And then here, this is a more eschatological, cosmic sense of restoration in Mark 9 that Jesus is talking about. This restoration, both in the right now and in the great beyond, this is part of Jesus's mission in Mark, as we've seen time and time again. So he restores the man's hand, and in response, there's not any rejoicing. There is a plan afoot. There is a plan being hatched. I want to look at a diagram of verse 6 with you, because I found the word order a little confusing initially, and just to make sure that this is making sense, we've got, if we just went parts of speech, we've got kai, no surprise there. We've got a participle here, active participle with the new tau, the epsilon sigma ending for masculine plural nominative, and there's the hoi, masculine plural nominative. So that's all as expected. So we've got, and the Pharisees going immediately with the Herodians. So it's still not making sense. Are they going with the Herodians, or is something else happening? Because this isn't even a finite verb or a main verb. So, and the Pharisees going immediately with the Herodians, a plan they hatched. So this edidun is our main verb. It's the finite verb. It's really the, if you were to split this sentence, or this clause anyway, into its most basic parts, you'd have a subject, which is hoi pharisaioi, and this finite verb, this predicate, edidun. Now the predicate includes all the other stuff, so the object and the participle. But this is the word that we're looking for as far as the verb goes, the finite verb, and this is the subject we're looking for. And then there's just more detail given about this. And this is exactly what the diagrams in accordance are set up to show. Whether you do these yourselves or look at the ones in accordance that are already done. I know this font's a little small. Let me make this a little more legible, hopefully. We've got this horizontal line split by a vertical line. At the left is the subject and its modifiers. At the right is the predicate, the verb and its modifiers. And so we've got, as I said, hoi pharisaioi and edidun. but then all this other stuff modifies it. Now, what maybe takes a second with this verse is that even if this is the main idea, it does not come until all these other words have come. And so they're subordinate to edidun, but we don't even know that because we don't see edidun until later on, which is why going left to right is great in translation, a word at a time, but it's also good to just maybe even read the whole thing before you start translating to see, okay, here's kind of my anchor, if you want to think of it that way. And then you can see here how this is connected with the immediately, with the Herodians against him. And so did they go out with the Herodians, or were they plotting with the Herodians? Well, it looks like they were just plotting with the Herodians. So they go out, they find the Herodians wherever they are, they start plotting against Jesus, specifically how him they might destroy. Subjunctive, because it hasn't happened yet. It's not, I mean, this is a conditional thing that they're trying for. Sumbulion edidun, giving counsel, plotting, hatching a plan. There are different ways you could translate that. Sumbulion, you could think of that as a consultation or a meeting. In fact, you've got Didanai here with Sumbulion. That's shown right here in BDAG. And so this is very early in the gospel to already have Jesus's life at risk, in my opinion. I mean, nobody asked me, but it's just going to show you that it did not take long before this plot is here. Now, it's going to take a while for that to unfold. And as we just saw, I mean, Jesus rises from the dead and beats this plot in the end. But already here in Mark 3, we've got this, and it's immediate. I mean, there's this euthus, which is a key word in Mark. I don't know that we saw it as much in the latter parts of the book, but they waste no time. I mean, they're just ready to go. So we have it in Mark 1 quite a bit. I'm just scrolling quickly here. 2, here it is in 3. 4. So especially early on, euthus gives us this sense of just fast moving, fast paced. There's not as much in 12 and 13, a little bit more in 14. And then at the end, there's the last euthus is here in 15. But early on, it's really present. And so we're getting this, it's almost like a compressed timeline, but things are happening very quickly. Let's stop there for comments or questions. This is a pretty important verse for the narrative of the book. I mean, it sets up some real suspense. We'll move on to the next passage after this, but I'd love to see if you've got comments or questions. Here's an interesting comment. Someone says, euthus immediately implies this opposition against Jesus has been stewing for a longer time, and then some references given there. Yeah, that's great. Let me see what other comments and questions we have. Yes. Oh, I love this comment. Let me put this in the chat. Somebody else says, when does clarifying him invalidate your rule? When the text is ambiguous, let your translations be ambiguous. Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah, I'd have to think about that more. I think that's the question for the translator to keep before them. And I don't like to use the word trade-off, but we do know that, I mean, I forget who it was. There's a Latin version of this translation is a betrayal or something like that. You know, you simply cannot go one-to-one from any language into another. I mean, that's just how languages work. And so in that sense, there are trade-offs. Like if I want to keep the ambiguity of the text, I might lose the clarity. The way that I would answer this question, which I really appreciate, is I would ask myself another question, which is, does Greek in general tolerate more ambiguity than English? And I think the answer to that is yes. And if that's the case, how does that affect how I deal with ambiguity, if that makes sense? So I hate to answer your question with a question, but it is such a good question. I think to me, the point is, you know, I want both to honor the text and not leave the reader confused. And sometimes those can feel, at least initially, like they're at odds. So yeah, it's not an easy question. But I guess with the ambiguity, I'd also want to know, is this like a deliberate ambiguity? Is it a play on words? Or is this just, Mark can kind of throw around these pronouns and it's not a big deal? Whereas in English, that might be a little bit more confusing. That's kind of how I would frame it. But I really appreciate that question. Thanks for asking. Here's another comment. This came in a little while ago. Sorry for the delay on this, but I'll put this in the chat. Somebody says, synagogue in Capernaum today dates to a period after Jesus, but one can see the flooring of Jesus' synagogue below it if one looks at the side of the building structure. Yeah, this is a great passage. I mean, anytime you see synagogue, we haven't really been doing this, but to maybe look at some of your visual tools, or even look at a map or an atlas and see what kind of stuff you find there. Accordance has a lot of image-rich tools that can even give you a visual of that. Yeah, here's another good comment. Put this in the chat. Synoptically, Mark 3 occurs at a similar time frame to Matthew 13 and Luke 11. Mark is really compressing the events before his rejection. The easiest way to see that is, maybe you know it, but if you go to add parallel info pane, you'll get your parallel passages right here. And the man with the withered hand, we've got Matthew 12, we've got Luke 6, Mark 3. Yeah, so as far as when this happened, that is an interesting question. I mean, I think we know that history is full of attempts to do what's called harmonize the Gospels, kind of put them all together in a time frame. For whatever reason, Mark has this early on, and we could wonder about why and how does that advance the particular aims of Mark's gospel. But yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Let me just see if I've gotten all the questions or comments. All right, I think we're good on questions. Yeah, good comment. We'll transition with this, but somebody says, be careful, parallel may be same event or similar events. Yep, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. So you'd want to look at that more. I mean, yeah, of course it's possible Jesus healed more than one man with a withered hand, but I think the way we would go about that is if a lot of the wording overlaps, to me anyway, that would make a case for it is the same one. All right, well, let's tackle this whole paragraph together, verses 7 through 12. And I'm going to read this in accordance, and then we'll go from there. Kai ha Jesus metaton matheton autu anekoresin prostain thalasan kai palu plethas apotes Galileas ekoluthesin kai apotes Judaias. And I'm just going to stop there and do some English. And Jesus with the disciples of him, and Jesus with his disciples withdrew or went away to or toward the sea. And palu plethos, many as an adverb, and then almost like many as a noun. So a great multitude is what you might see. A great many from Galilee followed, and from Judea. So this Kai here, and I just wanted to stop and do the English here because we get a lot more Kais. This is who followed him. A great many from Galilee and from Judea, and Kai apo Hierosalumon, Kai apotes Idumaias, Kai perantu Iordanu, Kai peritiran, Kai Sidona, Plethas palu, Akuantes hasa epoie, Elthan pros autan. So you've got this great many from Galilee following him, and also a great many from Judea and from Jerusalem and from Idumea and from beyond the Jordan and from the area surrounding Tyre and Sidon. A great many hearing all that he did came to him. Let me actually just stop there after those two verses. So we'll just do 7 and 8, even though I've got it all here in a paragraph. Then Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great many from Galilee followed him, and from Judea, and from Jerusalem, and from Idumea, and from beyond the Jordan, and from around Tyre and Sidon. A great many came to him because / when they heard all the things he had done. Now, this because / when here is due to this akuantes, this participle that goes with eilthon. Here, let me just open up the diagrams here. And it could have to do with contemporaneous time, or it could be causal. So they came to him having heard all that he had done, or they came to him because they heard, or more literally, and hearing all that he had done, they came to him. But it's, I think, highly likely that it is because they heard these things that they came to him. And if that's the case, you can bring that out here in translation. Palu plethos, and then plethos palu. In 7 and 8, you've got this nice little inclusio, this mirror image, palu plethos and plethos palu. A great multitude is what you might see in translation. The idea is a whole lot of people. I would just not translate it as many and leave it at that. I think it's almost like saying many, many came to see him. This would be a good place to check different translations. A great multitude, that's kind of the large, or kind of the King James language. A large crowd, and crowd, by the way, here would be translating this plethos, so a large multitude, a large crowd, a great multitude. You know, if you think about it, large crowd is almost redundant because a crowd kind of implies large, so it would retain that emphatic nature of polyplethos. A great crowd, a great multitude, a great many. You've got some options here for how to translate it, but interesting that Mark gives that to us twice, even as he's listing all these places. And they come to him because of what he's done. So you've got, I don't want to pontificate about this too much, but one of Mark's questions implicitly is, how will you respond to Jesus? And we talked about that last week, that one theory about that ending, if the ending truly is the women being afraid and they ran away and didn't say anything to anyone. I shared my seminary professor's thought that might be Mark's wink and nod to the readers and saying, you're not going to be afraid, are you? If that's the case, and you may not agree with that at all, but if that's the case, you've got Mark potentially doing the same thing here. Readers can read this and they can say, all right, Jesus is the great healer. Am I going to get mad about that because it's kind of shaking things up, or expecting something, or reworking my worldview? Or am I going to come to him because of all these things that he had done? Now, whether you think Mark is doing that on purpose or not, it's clear in the narrative that Mark is giving us vastly different responses to Jesus. Some people are running away from him. We had exilthante, so they're going away from him to plot to kill him. Other people are running toward him. They're following him. And it's because of all the things that he had done, which they see as great things. So very different responses. Mark is not explicitly saying, and what the Pharisees did was bad and what the crowds were doing was good, but I think that gets pretty clear, if not already, as Mark goes on. This is the response for disciples to have. So then verse 9, and questions, comments, welcome at any time. I'll make sure we're caught up on them before we end. So verse 9, kai epen tois mathe tais autu hina ploiarian proskartere auto diatonaklan hina me philibosin auton. And he said to his disciples, or he told them that a little boat, they should get ready for him, because the crowd, in order that the crowd might not press in against him. Let's just do verse 9. He told his disciples to prepare a little boat for him so that the crowd might not press in against him. I wasn't super careful or even consistent about this in this translation that I made, but one thing to think about is that in Greek, you've got this hina plus the subjunctive, And so the King James will always bring that out as a subjunctive in English, lest they should throng him. That's quite a word there. That's the ASV. Let's see what the King James has. Probably something similar. Yeah, well, it is the same thing. Lest they should throng him. So the King James is more likely to keep the Greek subjunctive as the English subjunctive. I've said before that most North American English speakers are not, we're not always aware of how we use the subjunctive. We might even be kind of sloppy and use an indicative verb where the subjunctive is technically grammatically correct. All that's to say, we're more likely to use an infinitive here than a subjunctive. And that's even just kind of accepted English style now, in a way that when the King James came out, it was, subjunctive was more in use. So like I said, I haven't been really consistent with this, but so that the crowd might not press in against him. That's a little wordy, and I would maybe in another final draft say, he told his disciples to prepare a little boat for him so that the crowd wouldn't press in against him, or for the crowd to not press in against him. We often will use the infinitive in place of the subjunctive. So just something to consider. But this is a possibility, a distinct possibility that Jesus doesn't want to have happen because it's not his time yet. Verse 10, we get Paulus gar etherapusin, for many he healed, hoste epipiptain auto, hina autu hapsontai, hasoi ekon mastigas. For many he healed, for he healed many, so that they pressed in against him in order that, and now here we have that hina in subjunctive again, they pressed in against him in order that he might touch them, as many who had diseases. For he healed many, so that whoever had afflictions pressed in on him so that they might touch him. Another example here of the subjunctive probably being better rendered by the infinitive in English, pressed in on him to touch him. So much more elegant, in my opinion, than so that they might. But I kept that there just to show that the subjunctive is in Greek. And it's possible that your translation has the goal of, as much as you can, preserving things like mood and tense. So when you get a historical present like lege in Greek, maybe your decision is you want to keep that in English. And maybe with the subjunctive, you want to keep the subjunctive in English. So that's what I've done here. But I think a smoother translation would revert to the infinitive, which is typically how we might talk about something like this. This gar in verse 10 gives us background information about why Jesus was about to be compressed. And this mastigas is a condition of great distress, torment, suffering. That would be a word, Mark has other words for sickness and disease, but this would be a good word to look at and see what we've got in Mark. We've got it a couple times here, actually, early on. So you might look at that and see how that's used. But like I said, Mark's got lots of synonyms for that too. But again, this crowd's response is that they want to draw near to Jesus rather than go away from him. And in fact, so near they want to touch him because they want to be healed. Now we've got another group with another response to Jesus. So if you think about the Pharisees consulting with the Herodians, so they go away from the scene of the healing and plot to kill him. You've got Jesus leaving the scene too and trying to get away, but people follow him to touch him. And now we've got a third response to Jesus, which is a really interesting one. It really advances Mark's narrative, but maybe not on purpose in terms of what these unclean spirits are saying. Kai ta pneumata ta akatharta, hatan auton etheorun, prosepiptan auto, kai krason legantes hati su e hahuias tu theou. And the spirits unclean, and the unclean spirits, whenever they saw him, fell down or would fall down before him and cry out, saying, "You are the Son of God." This, I think, is worth further exploration just in terms of the interpretation and what does it mean that the demons are naming a truth that the religious leaders have gone away and have not named. Again, I'm not here to preach, but I think that's something that's worth reflecting on. Surely in Mark, this, we don't really see it here, so you might need to adjust your search, but we saw toward the end that we had, he is the Son of God. Truly, this man was the Son of God. That was at the cross, the centurion saying that. And we had this beginning. We know this is a textual issue, but we have arche tu euangeliou, Iesu Christou huiou theou. So a number of commentators have pointed out that this huiou theou is bookends to Jesus's life. It's not really bookends to the gospel because you still have the resurrection account to go here. But Jesus's introduction and then his death are described with huios theou. So that is a theme in Mark. Jesus as the Son of God. And here the demons, or the unclean spirits, as Mark calls them, reinforce that. We could ask, how did they know? What did they mean? Were they mocking him, or were they really saying that sincerely? Commentaries will have a lot of great stuff on this. The translation itself, not too hard. You are the Son of God. I did think it was interesting that we had epipipto in verse 10 and prospipto, so the same pipto root where you've got people pressing in on Jesus, almost like they're falling all over him. Notice that pipto root, to fall. And then here we've got a different kind of pipto, falling before, almost like a worshiping kind of falling. I mean, that's here. It says in the gesture of a suppliant. So in the gesture of worship, prostrating oneself before someone. So this to me is saying, I don't know if you can say here that the demons are worshiping Jesus, but there is a submission in this posture. There's an acknowledgement that you are the Son of God. And I would want to do more research on this word, and certainly there's a lot of theology involved here to see just how far do we take this. Do we take this to be something like they fell down in worship and cried out? I don't think so. I think that, you know, you'd have a lot of hurdles to get past to establish that. So I would just keep it as they fell down before him. But certainly that's a question of interpretation that I think is well worth exploring. So Jesus's response, you have spoken rightly. Nope, he says, not that. Kaipala epetima autois hiname autan phaneran poiesosin. And muchly or sternly, he was rebuking them in order that they might not make him known, so that they might not make him known. You are the Son of God, they said, but he sternly rebuked them, telling them not to make him known. We've got this pala here. We had the palu plethos. We've got that all and many in verse 10. And now this word is intensifying Jesus's speech to them. He's saying, look, cut it out, you know, sternly rebuking them, telling them not to make him known. That, of course, raises the question, why does he tell them not to make him known? We talked in chapter 8 about this so-called messianic secret when Jesus tells his disciples, and this is 5 chapters later, not to make him known. You might make the case that unclean spirits are not your best publicity agents, so maybe there's something with that, but one way or the other, as we'll see in Mark chapter 8, a lot of this has to do with timing. So they say correctly, and he kind of is implying that they're right, but because he's saying, you know, don't tell anybody that. Here's a great comment, and I really appreciate this for translation, and then we'll wrap up. I know we're at time, but somebody says, fell down in awe need not imply worship, and I really like that translation. So not just fell down before him, but you could say fell down in awe before him. I think that would be warranted from this word. Again, we've got, this is just, in general, this gesture would have been understood as someone being in awe. So I think that's absolutely right. I think if you want to translate it that way, it makes sense. And yeah, you don't even have to get into the question of worship per se. Let's see what other comments and questions you have. I think I've caught up. If I've missed one, let me know. But I think we're all set. I know that's about twice the material as what we usually cover. We're going to be back next week. If you've got just a minute to stay on, I have learned from Troy, who heads up Accordance, that you maybe have seen that we're doing one-on-one paid training sessions, which he said have been requested by users over the last few years. My name is not on that page yet, but it will be, so I will be available for that. That is a shift in models from what we've had in the past. It means more one-on-one access. It also, unfortunately, means less, if not the end of these kinds of webinars. So I don't know if that will change in the future, but the word that I've gotten for now is that we're shifting models. Accordance is away from the free group webinars and into the paid one-on-one trainings. I don't know if that will change. I think there's some maybe kind of trial and error with this one-on-one session. But if you have any feedback on that, I would love to hear it. I don't know, like I said, how final this is. I do know, though, that we're going to get through Mark, God willing, by next week. We'll take the, what do we have to do, 13 through 30, maybe 2 times, maybe 1 time. We'll see how we go with it. But I did want to let you all know that. I don't know if there's a more formal announcement coming, but certainly any feedback is welcomed. It's not to say we couldn't restart something very similar to this in the future, but what that actually looks like is shifting, and certainly any suggestions we're open to. Best way to communicate that is probably by emailing me at abramkj@accordancebible.com. You can also leave a comment or question in the survey that will pop up as soon as I end this webinar. Let me actually just end the recording now, and I'll stay on for just another minute or 2. I want to respect your time. I'm going to stop the recording now. So if you're watching, tinyurl.com/Mark Translation Notes has the handout. Here's my email address.